The fog hung heavy over Kensington Palace that evening, curling through the gardens and around the stone facade like a living thing. The normally bustling grounds were muted under the gray haze, fountains glimmering dimly, the soft splash of water barely audible through the thick air. Inside, the corridors were warm but carried a sense of impending unease, as if the palace itself held its breath, waiting for something unseen to emerge. The scent of polished wood and faint traces of lavender from the servants' cleaning routines lingered in the air, a familiar comfort now tinged with tension. Sergeant Elias Thornton walked steadily through the corridors, his boots echoing softly against the marble floors. He had served the royal household for over 15 years, and yet tonight, every step felt heavier than the last. Elias had memorized these halls from his first days as a young guard, every archway, every hidden nook, every silent corner where shadows seemed to gather. But something tonight was off. Perhaps it was the fog pressing against the windows, or the faint rustle of curtains moved by the wind, or the subtle creak of the old palace floors. Or perhaps it was the whisper he had caught barely an hour ago, soft enough to be dismissed if not for the way it lingered in his mind. His family had served the crown for generations, and instinct had been honed into a quiet, unyielding vigilance. Instinct told him that what he had heard was not accidental. He moved down the east wing with methodical precision, his hand brushing lightly against the polished banister, eyes scanning the dimly lit corridor. Portraits of past monarchs and advisors watched from their gilded frames, the painted eyes seeming almost alive in the shifting light. He passed the doors to the state chambers, pausing briefly near the corner that led to the private suites. The soft hum of the heating system and the distant footsteps of late-night staff filled the spaces between shadows. Elias's senses were alert. Every echo, every creak, every breath of air was examined, measured, stored for future judgment. He had learned long ago that the palace rarely made mistakes. Every sound, every movement, every whispered word often carried meaning. Elias stopped at the threshold of the corridor leading to the private wing. He had received a subtle tip from Officer Reynolds, a colleague stationed near the west stairwell, noting unusual activity earlier in the day. Reynolds' voice had carried both caution and concern. "Watch the east wing tonight. Something feels off." "I can't say what." Elias remembered those words now as he advanced, the whisper replaying in his mind. "It must happen tonight. They cannot know." He paused, pressing his ear lightly against the wall, straining to catch any sound that might hint at movement. The corridor was silent, but silence, he knew, could be deceptive. A faint click echoed behind a tall tapestry lining the wall, almost imperceptible. Elias froze. His hand instinctively moved to the baton at his belt, fingers tightening around the leather grip. He stepped toward the sound, moving with the quiet precision of a man trained to be unseen and unchallenged. The tapestry rustled faintly, as if disturbed by the passing of air, and he carefully reached behind it. Nothing. Only the faint dust stirred, glinting in the lantern light. He straightened, exhaling slowly. Whoever had moved here had already vanished, or they were waiting, silent and patient, knowing that fear could be as controlling as force. His attention shifted to the windows overlooking the palace grounds. The fog muted the reflection of lanterns outside, turning the world into a blur of gray and gold. He could hear the distant bark of a dog in the grounds, the faint rattle of a gate somewhere in the north courtyard, the soft hum of early morning preparations in the kitchens below. But he could not hear the whisper again. It had come once, just once, soft and deliberate. Elias felt a chill run along his spine, not from cold, but from recognition, the recognition that someone had entered the palace with purpose, intent, and knowledge beyond what a typical intruder could possess. He moved toward the private suite doors, his boots making a soft but steady rhythm against the marble. The palace staff rarely moved at this hour, and any sound would have been noticeable. Elias paused briefly outside the door to the royal private chambers, listening for subtle shifts. A floorboard creak, a soft sigh, the scrape of fabric along wood. Nothing. The room behind the door remained silent. He could see the faint glow of the candlelight flickering through the curtain seams, shadows dancing across the wall like watchers. Yet even in the quiet, Elias felt the eyes of history upon him, as though the palace itself had stored centuries of secrets that now stirred with the night. He moved to the alcove connecting the main corridor with the back stairwell. The back stairwell, though less frequently used, provided a direct route between wings, and had long been a favorite passage for discreet movements. Elias's instincts screamed caution. He crouched slightly, hand on the baton, and listened again. The whisper had come from this general direction, soft, low, and almost too deliberate to be ignored. He thought of the past incidents he had witnessed. Minor intrusions, staff misunderstandings, even accidental accesses of private rooms. None had carried the kind of chill, the kind of intent that this whisper bore. It was deliberate. It was a warning. It was a threat. A soft shuffle reached his ears from the far corner. Elias's muscles tensed, every fiber in his body alert. The shuffle did not continue. It stopped as quickly as it began. He approached cautiously, noting the subtle shift in air pressure, the faint movement of dust along the floor. There was no one visible, but he knew instinctively that someone had passed, leaving no trace but the lingering sense of presence, like the shadow of a bird across the ground. He crouched to inspect the floor. A small metallic glint caught his eye, a fragment of a key, or perhaps a piece of a clasp. Elias reached down slowly, picking it up. The metal was cold, unfamiliar, engraved with a crest he did not recognize. His pulse quickened. Before he could examine it further, the distant echo of heavy footsteps drew his attention. He straightened, listening. The sound was deliberate and controlled, definitely human, definitely nearby. Elias crouched low again, moving silently toward the corner from which the sound had emanated. The corridor ahead remained empty, the shadowed arches unbroken. His senses sharpened, trained for decades to detect the smallest irregularities. Every step he took was calculated, measured, prepared for confrontation if necessary. He could feel the weight of history pressing down, the knowledge that palace walls held stories of plots, betrayals, and secret alliances, some never spoken aloud. He approached the central hallway where the whisper had originated, heart steady but mind alert. The faint sound of the rain against the palace windows seemed distant now, the corridors absorbing its rhythm. Elias adjusted his grip on the key fragment. Whoever had whispered in the palace had planned carefully, avoiding detection, choosing their moment deliberately. And the implications were grave. The whisper was not simply mischief, it was intent, and intent carried consequences. The palace, in its centuries of service, had prepared for intrusions of many kinds. But a deliberate whisper with unknown motives, aimed at the royal family, demanded immediate action. Elias exhaled slowly, looking toward the stairwell that led to the west wing. Every angle of approach, every possible escape route, every shadowed corner was a potential threat. He reached for his radio, hand steady despite the adrenaline, and pressed the button. "Control, Sergeant Thornton," he said, voice firm. "I require immediate lockdown procedures. Possible security threat reported in the East Wing. Someone has moved through corridors undetected. Repeat. Possible threat inside the palace." The static buzzed briefly before the voice on the other end replied. "Acknowledged, Sergeant Thornton. Initiating lockdown protocol. All doors to be sealed. Additional units en route. Maintain observation and report any changes." Elias lowered the radio, eyes scanning the corridor again. The palace felt different now, smaller, heavier, its history pressing in around him. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of candlelight could conceal the next move of an intruder. He moved carefully toward the nearest doorway, placing his hand lightly on the knob, ready to act. The whisper had come once, but he knew instinctively it would not be the last. The palace was alive tonight, aware and alert, and so was he. The king would be informed immediately, and doors would be sealed. Every corridor, every passage, every potential entry point would be under watch. Whoever had whispered in Kensington, the game had only begun. The palace responded with almost immediate precision. Security teams moved like silent shadows through the corridors, ensuring every entrance was locked, every stairwell sealed, and every possible passage under surveillance. Sergeant Elias Thornton remained at his post near the East Wing, eyes scanning the dimly lit corridor with unwavering attention. His pulse had yet to slow from the adrenaline of discovering the whisper. and he could feel every heartbeat echoing in the stillness of the palace. Every so often, the soft click of a locked ceiling or the shuffle of distant footsteps reminded him that the palace was alive, reacting as it always did to threats, real or imagined. Tonight, the fog outside seemed to press against the windows, lending a surreal weight to the world beyond the walls. It was quiet, but the quiet carried tension heavier than any storm. As he moved along the corridor, Elias noticed the subtle signs that something had been disturbed. A small vase slightly tilted, the edge of a rug folded in an unusual way. A faint mark on the marble floor, details that would normally escape notice, but which now suggested movement beyond ordinary maintenance. He crouched, brushing a fingertip along the floor, and caught a glint of something metallic. Another fragment, similar to the key piece he had found earlier, lay partially hidden near the corner. He carefully picked it up, inspecting the small emblem etched into the surface. It was unfamiliar, ornate, and suggested authority within the palace, but authority not granted to staff working at this hour. His jaw tightened. Whoever was here had moved with purpose, and the fragments left behind were pieces of a plan, deliberate in their placement. The faintest sound reached his ears, a soft rustle from the adjoining hall, too subtle to be footsteps, but enough to make him freeze. He pressed himself against the wall, hand on his baton, every sense alert. From the shadows emerged a figure, moving cautiously, carrying a small satchel. Elias raised a sharp hand, signaling them to stop. "Identify yourself," he commanded. The figure froze, then slowly revealed the face of young staff member Oliver Grant, one of the junior aides responsible for monitoring archives and maintaining keycard records. His expression was wide-eyed, almost fearful. "Sergeant Thornton," Oliver whispered. I didn't know anyone was here. I was delivering documents to the West Wing, but I thought I heard something and I—" Elias held up a hand. "Did you hear a whisper?" Oliver swallowed hard. "Yes. I thought it was a prank at first, but then I realized it was someone else." Elias's mind sharpened. "Where did it come from? Be precise." Oliver pointed shakily toward the far corridor, near the private suites. "That way. But I didn't see anyone. I only heard a low voice saying a name. Princess Charlotte." Then it stopped. Elias noted the words carefully, committing them to memory. "And did you move toward it?" Oliver shook his head quickly. "No, sir. I stayed at a distance." Elias nodded, motioning for him to follow. "Good. Stay close, but make no sound. Observe." As the three moved quietly, Elias's instincts remained razor sharp. He scanned the walls, the floor, even the ceiling, noting slight irregularities. A portrait slightly askew, the faint reflection of light off polished floors, the soft hum of heating vents, all could hide someone waiting. He adjusted his position near a corner leading to the staircase that connected the east and west wings, listening carefully. A faint whisper seemed to brush against his ear, but he realized it was the sound of his own steady breathing and the distant click of locks sealing doors. Still, he could feel a presence, as if the palace itself was watching, and he was meant to uncover what had been concealed. Suddenly, a soft, shuffling sound reached them again, closer this time. Elias raised his baton, signaling Oliver to step back slightly, though not out of sight. The shuffling paused, then began moving slowly down the corridor. Elias advanced carefully, forcing himself to remain calm despite the surge of tension. Each step felt deliberate, precise, as if the corridor itself responded to the rhythm of his movements. The soft tap of boots echoed faintly in the empty hall, though he could see no one in the dim light. He crouched near the intersection of corridors, listening as the sound shifted slightly, approaching the grand library entrance. Whoever moved here had purpose, knowledge, and audacity. Elias considered the possibilities. A staff member had acted as a courier before, sometimes delivering documents in secrecy for senior officials, but the whisper suggested more than simple movement. The voice was deliberate, focused, and aimed directly at one of the royal family members. That meant intent, premeditation, and risk. He scanned the library entrance carefully, noting the shadowy corners and alcoves. A single lamp glowed dimly near the far side of the room. He stepped closer, hand hovering over the key fragment he had found. ready to compare it to any keycard or lock mechanism they might find. He could feel the weight of the palace pressing in, a centuries-old aura of vigilance that now demanded clarity. Whoever had moved through these halls was testing boundaries deliberately, methodically, and perhaps dangerously. Then a soft cough echoed from the far corner of the library. Elias froze. Oliver stiffened, eyes wide. Elias signaled for silence and advanced cautiously toward the sound. He could see the faint outline of someone crouched near the lower shelves, partially hidden by shadows. "Identify yourself," Elias commanded, voice steady, unwavering. The figure slowly emerged, a young archivist named Lillian Pierce, known for meticulous work and discretion. She held a small folder in her hands, trembling slightly. "Sergeant Thornton," she whispered, voice tight. "I heard. I think I heard someone too. I didn't move closer, I swear. I was just checking records." Elias's eyes narrowed. "Lillian, did you see anyone else in the corridors?" She shook her head rapidly. "No, sir. Only whispers. I thought maybe it was my imagination. But the words, they said a name. Princess Charlotte." Elias exhaled slowly. His instincts had been correct. This was not imagination. Someone had been whispering about the princess, intentionally, and the fragments left behind suggested a deliberate plan, perhaps more extensive than anyone realized. He turned back toward Oliver. "We need to move carefully. Report this to control immediately, but no details about identity or key fragments yet. We must observe and ensure nothing else happens in this corridor." Oliver nodded, pale but steady. Elias pressed the radio. "Control, Sergeant Thornton. Potential insider activity near the private suites. Whispered reference to Princess Charlotte confirmed. Repeat. The threat may still be present. Recommend full lockdown of corridors connecting east and west wings." The static buzzed briefly before a voice replied. "Acknowledged. All doors sealing. Reinforcements en route. Maintain observation until arrival." Elias moved back toward the intersection, crouched low, eyes scanning every shadow. The whisper had returned faint, almost imperceptible, but deliberate. It floated across the hall from the direction of the stairwell. He froze, listening, and could just make out the soft syllables. "Tonight, she cannot know." His pulse surged. Someone remained in the palace, waiting, hidden, observing. The fragments, the whispers, and the strategic movement indicated intent beyond mere curiosity. Someone had planned this, and their goal had not yet been revealed. He clenched his baton, knuckles whitening, ready for the next step. Control's reinforcements would arrive soon, but until then, the corridors belonged to him and the unseen intruder, and the night was far from over. The sound of approaching footsteps finally cut through the tense stillness of Kensington's corridors. Elias Thornton remained crouched near the intersection, baton in hand, senses on high alert. From the shadows emerged two additional guards dispatched by Control, Sergeant Lydia Marsh and Corporal David Finch. Their presence added weight to the investigation, but also reminded Elias that whoever had moved through the palace corridors was still a live threat. The fog outside pressed against the windows, and the golden candlelight inside flickered, casting shifting shadows that seemed almost alive. Every movement of the guards, every small shuffle of a boot, seemed to carry more tension than usual. The palace was fully alert, and yet the intruder had already vanished into the labyrinthine corridors, leaving only whispers, fragments of metal, and the heavy sense of intent. Elias met Lydia and David's gaze, voice low but firm. "We've confirmed whispers targeting Princess Charlotte. Key fragments suggest deliberate movement through restricted areas. The intruder may still be nearby." Lydia's eyes narrowed. "Do we have any indication of direction or identity?" Elias shook his head. "Nothing concrete. Only a trail of metallic fragments and subtle disturbances in the corridors. Whoever this is, they know the palace intimately. Its acoustics, dead zones, and patrol rotations." David's jaw tightened. "So someone inside, or someone with inside knowledge. Either way, they've planned this carefully." Elias exhaled slowly. "Exactly. Which means we can't rely solely on observation. We need to anticipate their moves. The corridor stretched before them, long and shadowed, with alcoves leading to stairwells and minor rooms. Elias gestured for his team to split slightly, maintaining sightlines while covering multiple angles. Move quietly. Watch the intersections. Every corner could conceal a person or a plan. This isn't random. The guards nodded, stepping lightly, boots barely making a sound against the polished floors. Elias paused at a corner, leading to the west wing, hand on his baton, listening intently. The whisper had originated somewhere near this junction. His pulse raced. Whoever had spoken had vanished too quickly to be caught by sound alone. But Elias knew instinctively that their presence was not gone, only waiting, observing, calculating the next move. Suddenly, a soft metallic click sounded from the floor near the stairwell. Elias froze. He stepped closer, crouching low, and saw a fragment similar to those previously discovered, a small, engraved piece of metal reflecting the faint candlelight. He lifted it, inspecting the intricate emblem. Unfamiliar, yet suggestive of authority. Lydia leaned in. "Someone is leaving a trail," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Or testing us. Either way, deliberate." David moved to scan the alcove. "If they're still here, they'll act when they see us. Stay sharp." The palace walls seemed to hum with tension, every shadow now a potential threat, every faint sound amplified in the heavy silence. A sudden noise drew their attention, a soft shuffle from the far corner of the corridor. Elias signaled silence and motioned for the others to cover potential escape routes. From the shadows emerged Lillian Pierce, the archivist discovered during earlier patrols. She held a folder tightly against her chest, eyes wide with fear. "Sergeant Thornton," she whispered, voice trembling. I saw nothing, but I heard it again. Someone spoke about Princess Charlotte." Elias's gaze was steady. "Where exactly?" Lillian pointed toward the stairwell, voice low. "Near the old service entrance. I didn't approach. I only heard the voice." And then it stopped. Elias exhaled slowly. "Good. You did the right thing. Stay close, and don't leave my sight." He knew instinctively that Lillian's presence was crucial. As a trusted staff member, she could assist without alerting the intruder, but she was also a potential target. Every move now had to balance protection with observation. Elias turned to Lydia and David. "We need to secure the stairwell and monitor every access point. The intruder knows the palace better than we do. They're not random, they're strategic." Lydia nodded. "Agreed. We'll cover the exits while you continue forward." Elias took a deep breath and moved toward the stairwell, every sense alert. The faintest whisper brushed against his ear, almost imperceptible but deliberate. "She cannot see this coming." His heart raced. The intruder was not merely present, they were communicating, taunting, testing. Each word carried weight, intent, and danger. Elias adjusted his grip on the baton, ready to confront whoever had entered the palace, but also aware that the true threat might be someone of status, someone whose authority would give them easy access and plausible deniability. He advanced carefully down the corridor, leading to the stairwell, noting every slight disturbance. A shifted carpet edge, a faint indentation in the marble, a glint from a metallic fragment. Each detail told a story, and Elias read them with decades of experience. The whisper had been deliberate, targeted, and timed precisely. Whoever orchestrated this had not only knowledge of patrol rotations, but an understanding of human behavior, how fear could manipulate even the most trained guard. Elias exhaled, aware that the intruder's game was psychological as much as it was physical. A movement caught his eye, a shadow slipping across the far doorway leading to the maintenance hall. He gestured for Lydia and David to flank silently. Elias advanced alone, approaching the doorway, eyes sharp. The shadow froze, then disappeared entirely. Elias pressed forward, cautiously entering the hall. Inside, the faint glint of a metallic object lay partially hidden beneath a cart. He picked it up and recognized another fragment, engraved with a crest he had never seen before. The pieces were connecting. This was no ordinary intruder. Someone with authority, knowledge, and intent had infiltrated the palace, whispering threats directly about Princess Charlotte and testing the palace's defenses. Suddenly, a soft voice called from behind him. "Sergeant Thornton." Elias spun, baton ready. From the shadows emerged Officer Reynolds, breathless and pale. I intercepted a message from Control, Reynolds whispered. They've traced unusual keycard activity. Someone accessed multiple doors near the princess's suite. Timestamps indicate deliberate manipulation, not accidental errors. Elias's jaw tightened. We knew it. The fragments, the whispers, they're intentional. Reynolds nodded. Yes. And the logs suggest the intruder has knowledge of dead zones and patrol gaps. They may be hiding, observing, or planning the next move. Elias clenched his baton. Then we tightened the perimeter. Every door sealed, every corridor monitored. Tonight, no one moves without notice. And we find this intruder. From the far corner of the hall, a faint sound reached them. A deliberate click, a lock being tested. Elias froze. The intruder was still here, moving strategically, leaving pieces of a puzzle designed to test their vigilance. He signaled Lydia and David, spreading them to cover possible exits. The intruder would reveal themselves soon, either by misstep or by intent. Elias felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. Every moment could determine the safety of Princess Charlotte and the integrity of the palace. He adjusted his stance, senses alert, ready for confrontation. The whispers had returned. Faint, deliberate, taunting. Tonight, she cannot know. Watch carefully. Elias exhaled slowly, baton gripped tightly. The palace had been invaded not by brute force, but by knowledge, intent, and subtlety. And now, they would face the consequences. The grand hall of Kensington Palace felt colder than usual, despite the golden glow of chandeliers reflecting on polished floors. Security reinforcements had gathered swiftly, sealing every door, stationing guards at every corridor, and monitoring each staircase. Sergeant Elias Thornton, flanked by Lydia Marsh and David Finch, remained vigilant, eyes scanning the shadows that stretched along the walls. The fog outside pressed against the windows, blurring the world beyond and lending an almost otherworldly sense to the palace interior. The whispers had ceased for now, but their echo lingered, heavy and deliberate, like a warning carved into the very air. Each guard understood that the intruder was still present somewhere, observing, calculating, and waiting. Tonight, the palace was alive with tension, and the outcome would hinge on every decision they made. Elias motioned for the senior guards to gather around him near the center of the hall. We have confirmed whispered threats aimed at Princess Charlotte, he began, voice carrying clearly across the room. Fragments of metallic objects were recovered near key corridors. Keycard logs indicate unauthorized access to multiple restricted doors. We believe the intruder possesses intimate knowledge of the palace's layout, patrol schedules, and security blind spots. This is not a random act. He let the words sink in, as every pair of eyes fixed upon him. Our priority is clear. Protect the princess, secure every entrance, and identify the intruder before any further action is taken. No one leaves their post. No movement goes unchecked. From the far end of the hall, a familiar, commanding presence emerged. King Charles III. His footsteps were measured and authoritative, echoing softly but insistently against the marble floors. The guards instinctively straightened, aware that every royal movement carried both expectation and scrutiny. Charles surveyed the hall with sharp eyes, pausing briefly to glance at the fragments of metal displayed carefully on a nearby table. Sergeant Thornton, he said, voice low but firm. I have been informed of the whispered plot. Is the palace fully sealed? Elias nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. Every door sealed. Reinforcements in position. No corridor unmonitored. The king's jaw tightened. Good. Every door must remain sealed until this matter is resolved. No exceptions. I will personally oversee the next steps of the investigation. The hall grew still as Charles approached the fragments. His gaze flicked between them, recognizing the symbols etched into the metal. These crests. They suggest a person with authority or access beyond what is typical for staff. It is deliberate, isn't it? Elias met his eyes. Yes, Your Majesty. The intruder is precise and knowledgeable. They've tested our routines and exploited weak points. Charles's expression darkened. Then we have a calculated threat within our walls. This is not merely mischief. This is intent, and it cannot go unpunished. He turned slightly, eyes scanning the assembled guards. I want every corridor monitored, every camera reviewed, every key card scrutinized. We will leave no stone unturned. If someone thinks they can undermine the safety of my granddaughter or my household, they will face the consequences. From the corridor leading to the east wing, a soft shuffle interrupted the tension. Elias tensed immediately, baton in hand, signaling the nearby guards to hold positions. A figure emerged slowly, a young archivist, Lillian Pierce, clutching a folder to her chest. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear. "Your Majesty," she whispered, voice trembling. I heard the whispers again. Someone spoke Charlotte's name and moved near the private corridors. I did not see them, but the presence, it felt deliberate. Charles's eyes narrowed. "Good girl," he said, voice measured. "You stayed calm and reported it. That is the only way to ensure safety." Elias stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder lightly. "Lillian, you did exactly the right thing. Now stay with us. No one leaves this hall until we have a full account of the corridors." Charles turned sharply toward the assembled guards. "We need to know who is responsible, who has the access, the knowledge, and the intent to approach Princess Charlotte without detection. I want names, positions, and every last detail. This palace will not tolerate secrecy used against it." Lydia stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we have traced keycard activity and analyzed every patrol rotation. The logs suggest that someone moved with deliberate strategy, likely using authority or stolen clearance to access restricted areas. Fragments left behind indicate a pattern, someone testing our responses and observing from the shadows." Charles exhaled slowly, his expression darkening further. "Then the next step is containment. Every staff member present tonight is to remain in their quarters until we can review movements. We will not leave the palace vulnerable to whispers or shadows." Elias motioned for his team to review the keycard logs again. The fragments, whispers, and subtle disturbances were all pieces of a carefully orchestrated puzzle, and the palace itself seemed to hold its breath. The faint hum of heating vents, the soft tapping of distant footsteps, and the occasional creak of polished floors added to the tension. Each movement, each whisper, each metallic fragment suggested strategy, patience, and risk. The intruder had left no mistakes, no direct evidence, only the careful trails designed to provoke vigilance and fear. And now, under the watchful eyes of the king, the palace's protective measures were fully activated. From the far end of the hall, a soft metallic click echoed, subtle but deliberate. Elias's pulse surged. The intruder was still present. Charles's gaze hardened. "What was that?" he demanded. Elias advanced cautiously toward the source of the sound, baton ready, Lydia and David flanking him. The click repeated, coming from a small corridor near the west wing. Elias paused, crouched low, and peered into the shadows. A faint shimmer of metal caught the light, a fragment of the same ornate key found earlier. He picked it up carefully, holding it before the king. Charles's expression darkened further. "They are testing us. They are still here, and they are not afraid." The realization sent a ripple through the assembly. Every guard, every staff member, every watcher understood the danger. The intruder was patient, deliberate, and skilled. Charles stepped forward, voice low but commanding. "This palace will not yield to whispers or fear. Every exit sealed, every hallway monitored. Whoever dares to plot within these walls will face immediate confrontation, and they will be found." Elias nodded, aware that the palace's centuries of vigilance were now fully engaged. The whispers had begun, but so had the response. And every shadow, every corner, every faint sound would now be examined with relentless scrutiny. As the team moved to secure the West Wing corridor, Elias felt the familiar chill of tension. A faint movement caught his eye, a shadow shifting just beyond the corner, disappearing before he could fully focus. He signaled the guards to fan out, scanning every possible hiding place. Lydia whispered, voice tight, "They're watching us." Elias exhaled slowly. "Yes, and they will continue to test us until we find them." The palace seemed to pulse with anticipation, the fog pressing against windows, the shadows stretching long across the halls. Every step they took, every fragment they examined, every whisper of air carried the weight of impending revelation. The intruder had been patient, careful, and calculated, but the palace was no longer a quiet stage. It was a trap now, every guard a sentinel, every shadow under watch, every step deliberate. Charles watched as Elias held the fragment up again, turning it in his hands. "Prepare the palace for inspection," he commanded. "Every staff member, every room, every stairwell will be reviewed. Whoever left this behind will face the consequences. And I want this palace secured until the threat is neutralized." Elias nodded, baton ready, eyes scanning the corridors once more. As he stepped forward to inspect the hall, a faint whisper echoed, impossibly soft yet deliberate. "You cannot stop what is already in motion." The words brushed against the edges of consciousness, a chilling reminder that the intruder was still present, still watching, and still calculating their next move. Elias tightened his grip, knowing instinctively that the night was far from over. The palace held its breath, every shadow a potential threat, every corridor a stage for confrontation. And as King Charles gave the final orders to seal the doors and monitor every hallway, Elias realized that this was only the beginning. Someone had infiltrated the palace, whispered a plot, and tested their defenses. And now, the game of patience, vigilance, and cunning had begun. Whoever had moved through Kensington tonight had not yet revealed their final move, and the consequences for Princess Charlotte, the palace, and every soul within it would be determined by who acted first.